This video is lesson 16 of the Hands-on Equations learning system, and in this lesson we're going to show how we can use a pictorial method for solving equations that include stars and x's. You'll notice I no longer have the game pieces on here because in this video we're going to do everything by drawing pictures. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to draw a little sketch of your balance. And in this case we have two x's on the left hand side. X's I'm going to represent by shaded triangles. And then I have a star and a 6 on the right hand side. The star will be represented by an unshaded triangle, and then a 6 will be a 6 inside of a square. So what I'm going to want to do is try to get this 6 by itself, which means I need to get rid of this star on the right hand side. And there's a couple ways of doing that. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an x to both sides, because if I add an x to both sides, I'm going to form a zero pair over here that I can remove. And I would encourage you that every time you perform an action on your equation that you redraw that step. So that way when you are done with your equation, you have pictorial evidence of every step that you did to solve your equation. And then if you find out that you made some sort of mistake, you can go back and you have evidence of your thinking. The next thing that I want to do is add an x to both sides to make that zero pair. So this will be what my next step looks like. And then after that, I'm again going to redraw, and I'm going to remove that zero pair that I have on the right hand side. And yes, this does take a little bit longer to redraw after every step, but it is worth it in that you have evidence of your thinking all along the way. So that zero pair is now gone. And then in my final step, I have 3x's is equal to 6. If 3x is equal to 6, that makes x equal to 2, and that makes star equal -2. And because I showed my work in every single step, I can just go back to my original setup at the very top and plug in my values of x and -x to perform the check. So on the left hand side, 2 plus 2 is 4, and the right hand side, 6 minus 2 is also 4. So 4 equals 4. Confirms that x equals 2 and star equals -2. Here's a second example. I'm going to go ahead and draw my balance. And on the left hand side, I have two x's plus a star plus a 3. And on the right hand side, I have two stars plus a 15, and I can just make 15 all in one box. And in the next step, I want to get all the number cubes on the same side. So I'm going to go ahead and redraw, but I want to get rid of this 3, so I'm going to mark it out. And I want to change this 15 to a 12, because 15 minus 3 is 12. After this, it looks like I can start getting rid of some of the stars that are on the same side as my new number. So what I'm wanting to do now is I want to take away a star from both sides. And let me finish redrawing this. So this is what it looked like after the last step. But now I want to take away a star from both sides. And let's now redraw it of what it will look like now. So now we have two x's on the left-hand side and a star and a 12 on the right-hand side. But what I need to do next is I need to still try to get rid of this star on the right-hand side. I think what I'm going to do to get rid of that is I think I'm going to add an x to both sides. And the reason I chose to do that is because now I have a zero pair right here that I can remove in the next step. So here's my next step. I now have 3 x's on the left, and my zero pair that I'm going to remove on the right, I'm going to show removing that, and then I still have the 12. And then at the very bottom, I'll show what I have left after I've completed that last step. I have 3 x's equal 12. So 3 times what is 12? 3 times 4 is 12. If x is 4, star is equal to -4. I can go back to the top and substitute the values of x and star, and then add up each side of the equation. So 4 plus 4 is 8, minus 4 is back to 4, plus 3 is 7, and then 15 minus 2 4s is also 7. My check, 7 equals 7. Here's another example, and again you can pause the video at any time to try this on your own and then come back and check your work. My original equation is an x, and then I'm wanting to subtract 3 stars, but I don't have any stars, so I know what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to add some 0 pairs. So here is one 0 pair, here is another 0 pair, and here is a third 0 pair. And I'm wanting to remove 3 stars, so right away I need to remove those 3 stars and then put a 2. And on the right hand side I have an 8, and I'm wanting to remove 2 x's, but I don't have any x's, so I know I'm going to have to put 2 0 pairs and then immediately remove 2 x's. Alright, this is already looking messy, so I'm going to redraw this. Looks like what I'm left with on the left hand side is 1, 2, 3, 4 x's and a 2. And on the right hand side, 2 stars and an 8. And notice I kind of changed the order here. I put the 8 after the stars, but that's not going to matter because the commutative property of addition says that I can flip the order. The next thing I want to do is make sure that I have number cubes only on one side of the equation, so I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So redraw my x's and show that I am getting rid of that 2, and redraw the stars and then show that I am changing the 8 to a 6 because 8 minus 2 is 6. So now let me redraw what I have after that step. I should have 4 x's on the left and 2 stars and a 6 on the right. And I want to try to get this 6 by itself, so I need to somehow get rid of both of these stars. And to do that, I think I'm going to just add 2 x's to both sides. So if I put an x right here and right here, 2 x's to that side, I must add 2 x's to the left side. And in my next step, this is what I'll now have. I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's on the left-hand side. And I'll have an x with a star and an x with a star, and then a 6. And you can probably see exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of these 2 0 pairs. And what I'll have left after I do that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's equals 6, which makes x equal 1 and star equal -1. I'll go back to the original equation, plug in those values to check. So x was 1. And notice I'm not going to put anything on these stars because they were not part of my original equation. They were removed in the original equation. On the right-hand side, I'm not going to put anything in the x's because they were removed in the original equation. But the stars have a value of -1. So left-hand side, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the right-hand side, I have 8 minus 1 and then another -1, which equals 6. So I have confirmed my answers of x equals 1 and star equals -1. This would be another good time to pause the video and try this one on your own, and then come back and check your solution. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. Instead of drawing triangles for the stars and x's, I'm just going to use the symbol star or x. So on the left-hand side, I want 2 stars, as well as an x and a 1. And then on the right-hand side, 2 x's and a 13. If you prefer to just use x's and stars, that's fine, or you can draw the triangles. first thing that I'm going to want to do is remove numbers so that I only have numbers on one side. So in this case, I'm going to remove the 1 from both sides. So I'm going to show me removing that by marking it out there, and then redraw, and then show subtracting 1 here and ending up with 12. So after I finish that step, I have 2 stars and an X on the left with no numbers, and on the right 2 X's with a 12. Now be careful when you're doing this. It's very easy to get very messy, and obviously there's not that much difference between a star and an X in these symbols, so you're just going to have to make sure that your handwriting is legible. My goal is to get this 12 by itself, so I need to get rid of both of these X's. It looks like I can get rid of one X right away because there's an X on both sides. So that's what I'm going to do next, is get rid of this X and this X. And after I've done that, I have 2 stars on the left and an X and a 12 on the right. Still need to get rid of this X, so I think I'm going to add a star to both sides, because now I've formed a 0 pair that I can remove on the next step. So now that I've added a star to both sides, let me redraw that. And then I can show that I'm actually removing this 0 pair. And after I do that, I'm left with 3 stars equals 12, which makes the star equal 4. If star is 4, X is equal to -4. I can put those values in my original equation. Star was 4, X was -4. On the left-hand side, we have 4 plus 4, 8. Minus 4 is 4. Plus 1 is 5. And on the right-hand side, we have 13 minus 4 is 9. Minus 4 is also 5. 5 equals 5. And we have one more example. Again, this would be a good time for you to pause the video and try this on your own. This problem definitely has a distributive property, first thing right up here at the top. So when I first draw my initial setup, I need to make sure that I do what's in the parentheses, the X plus 4, and I'm going to use just X's and stars again on this one. I need to do the X and the 4 twice, because I want 2 X's and 2 4s. Then I also need 3 stars. And then on the right hand side, 2 stars and a 15. In general, it's always wise to group your variables together whenever possible. So I'm going to move my X's together, my stars together, and then my numbers together. I have 2 4s. I'm just going to write that as an 8. So I can do that when they're on the same side because of the commutative property. Can't do that between different sides, obviously. What I want to do next is get all the numbers all on one side. So I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. 15 minus 8 is 7. So here's what our equation now looks like. 2 X's, 3 stars, 2 stars, and a 7. I want to try to get the 7 by itself. And it looks like I can just subtract 2 stars from each side, because I have at least 2 stars on each side, so I can get rid of 2 stars from each side. And here's what I now have. 2 X's and a star on the left, and then a 7 on the right. And I see a 0 pair already on the left, so I'm going to get rid of that 0 pair because it has no value. So what I'm left with is X equals 7, which makes star equal -7. When I go back and do the check, X has a value of 7, star has a value of -7, And I'm going to need to add all these up. 7 plus 4 is 11, and another 11, that's 22. Minus 7 would be 15. Minus another 7 would be 8, and minus another 7 would be 1. On the right-hand side, we have 15 minus 7, which is 8. Minus another 7 is 1, so 1 equals 1. So to recap, in this lesson, we've transitioned from using manipulatives to, again, working these longer problems out by drawing pictures, either using triangles and squares to represent our variables and our numbers, or just using letter notation with X's and stars to represent the variables.